Welcome to the Urbanista, where we discuss the water management challenges of Nordic cities. From safe drinking water distribution and stormwater collection to building sustainable urban living environments. Here is your host, Delphine Vesalo.
Hey, welcome back, Urbanistas. Over the last 6 months, we have continued to meet, talk, and ask questions to some of the leading players in the urban development industry. Our season 2 of the Urbanista has been a fascinating one, learning so much about so many aspects from LCAs to EPDs, circularity, sustainability, and all about the new legislation and standards that we will soon have to manage. In fact, there's been so much so that we wanted to make a recap of what happened during this 2024 year so far. In this episode, we are looking back at some of those highlights on the past episodes. So let's start. First off, back in September, for episode 17, we spoke to Magnus Lundin, responsible for potable water solutions inside Uponor. He told us about some of the challenges currently facing the water industry, and since urban populations are growing, all infrastructure needs renewing, but it can be difficult in the context of all cities with existing infrastructure and complicated urban design. There can also be problems with newer developments in areas with contaminated soils, with oil, petrol, and many other components that we can find due to historical reasons. These solutions can then cause other problems, such as leakage. So something to bear in mind when you are planning that type of potable water solutions. All this, of course, has consequences financially, in addition to the new European Drinking Water Directive, which is another change that we will have to manage in the next coming times for the water companies. Of course, the materials that should be certified for drinking water. I have also heard something about the directive of the drinking water. That's something that is evolving as well. I don't know if it's only in Sweden or it's across the Nordics or maybe in Europe.
It's a European directive, and it's slowly coming into force. So that will also affect how the utilities, what kind of products and material that they use, which is in contact with drinking water. And there I would also say that plastic pipes and also tanks and chambers for made of plastic is a very good choice because they have already all the certifications to be allowed to be used in drinking water.
Because the certification needs to be for the pipe, for the chamber, but also anything that goes inside, the flow meter, any other thing. Everything should be certified, right?
Every material that is in contact with drinking water.
Then, after Magnus, in episode 18, we spoke to Ricard Granat, Global Solution Manager for Stormwater at Uponor Infra, who came to talk to us about oil separation. Ricard is our stormwater expert, and he was explaining the importance of oil separation in protecting our rivers and lakes and other water recipients. It is a rather complex situation with even legal requirements depending on each individual context, each individual area or country, but what it is essential is preventing the pollution. Ricard took us through all the clever systems used to separate oil, their effectiveness, and how much they need maintenance and monitoring. So if you are keen on all things stormwater and particularly oil separation, go and look for Ricard episode. It's number 18. So what would be the main criteria to choose the type of oil separator that you will need for any given project?
So it is the type of site that you have then or application, but then it's varying in size as well. So I mean, if you have a big parking area, you couldn't use the smallest oil separator. Then you need a bigger because you have also you need some type of retention time. So dependent on the flow you need to vary the size of the oil separator. And it also catches sludge or sediments. So also that you can vary the size of this sludge trap dependent on where you are.
In episode 19, it was really nice to meet with Reina Kankanen, Head of Sustainability at Ramboll Finland and Chair of the Infrastructure Committee at the Green Building Council Finland. Reina is an expert in sustainable infrastructure. She explained us their framework that consists on 9 criteria for sustainable infrastructure, covering social, economic, and ecological sustainability. Each of these is a very important perspective to consider. For example, ecological sustainability aims to find a balance between human society and nature. The construction sector is a very intensive raw material user, and the raw materials have been found to be a significant threat to limiting the global warming to less than 2 degrees. So it raises the question, how can we use and develop the current environment and infrastructure? And also the question, how long can we afford to build new, quote unquote, new in our society, and has to consider the current limits and carrying the capacity of the planet? Reina explained her ideas regarding choosing materials, renovating infrastructure, and the predilection for looking at the economic sustainability perspective. Finally, she talked about net zero and gave her opinion on whether we are getting closer to it or is it still a bit far away. So go to episode 19 to listen her compelling point of view.
Circularity, low carbon emissions solutions, they exist. They are here to choose. So we can start already today. Every project is a possibility, and also we should see these possibilities more clearly, that each element in the built environment should be examined with an open mind to understand which new and different benefits it could provide in a system. That could a bridge contain a battery or be part of the new habitats and ecological links, or could we fix more carbon in the structure that is released in the atmosphere? So seeing those possibilities in the infrastructure, those have been studied already in some of the projects, that we really take the project and we see and start to see those possibilities for, of course, reducing harm, but doing also more good.
Urbanista had an exciting new format, and we came together for the first time in episode 20 with our colleagues from Global Water Intelligence. Talula Lutkin, Utility Performance Editor at JWI, discussed with us some of the stories in the water industry that are making headlines. These stories included the amendment by the European Union Parliament to the polluter pays clause, reducing company liability for microplastic cleanup from 100% to 80%. We discussed also about a project in Australia planning to build greenhouses powered by wastewater plants. That was super interesting. And finally, a reflection on the global increase of water tariffs that are impacting, the pockets of all of us, all the water consumers. A sharp 8.2% in average increase across the world. The water is getting more expensive. Should we say more expensive or less cheap?
Yes, that's a very good point. I think less cheap is definitely the right way to go. We consider, obviously we're biased in the water industry, but we think that water is too cheap. When you look at how much, as I said, water utilities need to invest, how capital heavy water is. I mean, I can give the example from the UK. At the moment, people may have heard that the UK water industry is kind of under fire. There's a lot of bad things going on and people are asking for change. And the water utilities are going to be presenting their 5-year plan. So kind of their 5-year plan of what they're going to do. And it's record investment. They're saying we're going to invest a lot of money in the next 5 years. And then they're saying, but to do that, we need to increase their tariffs. And suddenly people are not very happy, obviously, about tariffs increasing. But, the water utilities need that money. And it's really interesting. I think the tariff survey, we have been doing this for over 10 years now. So every year, every summer, we collect the tariffs for over 500 cities across the world. So it's, how much do people pay for water, wastewater, and stormwater combined? And the trend that we saw this year was really a sharp increase. So 8.2% is the average increase worldwide. That's really quite significant. It's usually kind of around 4 to 5%.
This 8.2% is compared to the previous year.
Yeah, so previous year was around, I think, 6%, although I'd have to check that.
But this spike came during the last year. And
yes,
if I don't know if you remember the numbers, but you mentioned at least during the past 10 years has been consistently increasing.
Yes.
Has been all the 10 years increasing, and this particular from last year to this is when we have this peak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's the second highest peak we've had in the last 10 years is this 8%.
Next to visit the Urbanista in episode 21 was sustainability expert Panu Pasanen. He is the CEO at One Click LCI, which is a company that provides life cycle assessment software worldwide for the construction and manufacturing industries. Panu gave a comprehensive explanation of what LCAs and environmental product declarations are and how they are calculated. Both standards are essential steps towards making industry more sustainable. But they are perhaps a bit more complicated than we may think sometimes. Panu showed us how long and complex a true LCA can be and needs to be in order to give all full information which really represents the impact of our projects, not only in the construction phase, but before and after that as well. Go to episode 21 for the full explanation from Panu.
If we are evolving all the time, the criteria is evolving, as you said, they are changing. An EPD that was issued in, let's say, 2020, under the criteria of 2020, was correct and accurate and valid, but then the criteria kept changing over the next 2-3 years. So we should say right now that EPD may or may not be valid anymore.
EPDs are valid for 5 years from publishing. So
5 years.
We still have valid EPDs which represent the older generation of standards, but no new EPDs are published under those standards anymore since some time. So all the new EPDs are published under the new generation of standards.
In episode 22, we have the honor to talk with a very familiar person from the urban planning world. He has recorded over 400 episodes of his very own podcast, Urbanistica, an international podcast about the making of smarter and more livable cities. He is also an urban planner and studio manager at AFRI in Stockholm and a placemaker EU leader. Yes, we are talking about, of course, Mustafa Sharif. Mustafa shared his insights into how society has ended up focusing urban design around mobility and transport. However, this has resulted in many issues, such as sustainability problems and even social segregation. So that traditional utopic, quote-unquote, utopic image of the Nordic cities as the model that everybody wants to follow actually was also discussed, and Mustafa was challenging it. Then finally, the cherry on the cake was, of course, one of Mustafa's dearest topics, placemaking. So if you have not listened to it, look for episode 22 with Mustafa. You really, really don't want to miss it.
Can you share any I don't know if it's personal story or maybe a project, whatever you're willing to share, that has significantly influenced this in your career as city maker?
Yeah, actually, it was like in the beginning of my career. I started to work on this child-friendly city approach, and then we went to a school and I talked with children to understand like how they move in the area, their dreams, needs, and so on. And I remember like I was kind of crying during the dialogue with the kids, and then afterward, because like I saw kids, they had problems, physical problems, and because they didn't had so much space to move in the daily life, not in the schoolyard because it was very little, not even in the area because there was no place. The place was for parking cars or other logistic things, no playgrounds and so on. And the teacher told me like they are suffering physically because the urban space is not giving them the chance to move or to exercise and so on. Then I went back like to the office, and it was a shock for me, like how planners and designers affecting the now generation, next generation. And then I promised myself I will change this at least as much as I can. And this has affected me a lot because then I saw the impact of what we do, how much danger we can create and how much good quality of life we can create as designers. So this project was very special for me, and every time now I'm going to school for the dialogue, I'm afraid. I hope that I will not see what I saw in the beginning.
Back in the studio for episode 23 in February was again Talula Lutkin, Utility Performance Editor at Global Water Intelligence, who came to discuss with the Urbanista some of the most recent top stories affecting the water industry. First off, we were in the season of COP28, which had left a slight concern that the water utilities were not as involved as they should be overall in the sustainability conversation. This perception of this worriness followed by a minimal participation at the Stockholm Water Week and left many people feeling that the progress is happening, yes indeed, but more is definitely needed. Also on the agenda was the direct potable reuse, also known as the toilet to tap, quote unquote, toilet to tap process. A new corporate sustainability reporting directive, one of the most ambitious reporting requirements in the world. Germany's utilities failing behind in their treatment of wastewater, sludge targets. That was another big topic. And an interesting case where a community in Sweden has successfully sued a water utility for PFAS in water supply. And that has posed a question from the journalists. Where lies the responsibility for PFAS contaminations?
There's been a lawsuit so it's a small town in Sweden where the residents sued their local water utility for personal injuries due to PFAS contamination, right? So the residents are saying our water was contaminated by PFAS and that has had a detrimental effect on our health, and so they're suing the water utility. And in this case, the residents won the case, right? So that the courts said yes, it is the water utility's fault. And so I think that for me, at least, this sets quite a dangerous precedent for water utilities. If the responsibility for PFAS contamination can be laid at their door, I think it's going to be very difficult. We keep talking about extra burdens for utilities, extra water, reporting burdens, investment burdens. And if they're also going to be having to pay money for lawsuits with people who are taking them to court due to PFAS contamination, it's really quite a tricky situation. And I think what's interesting to note is that this isn't the only kind of lawsuit that exists. There are also some lawsuits in Sweden where the utilities have been suing. So in this case, it's the Army Corps for PFAS contamination, because a lot of the contamination comes from firefighting foam, right? So, if you're fighting a fire, they've got this foam and it actually contains PFAS, and then that gets into the water system. And so in this case, the water utilities are saying, no, it's not our fault. It's the fault of these, of the army who are using these firefighting
exactly.
foam.
From where the chemical initially came from. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. And then the third case, so this is happening in the United States, but this also happened a couple of months ago. So this small town in Wisconsin, they're suing the PFAS manufacturers, right? So they've got this big lawsuit against 3M, DuPont, and all these chemical manufacturers who are the people who are actually creating the PFAS in the first place, right? So it's like, the water utilities, yes, they should, they're in charge of drinking water quality, but actually it's been contaminated by the firefighters. But actually, that's not the firefighters' fault. Maybe it's the fault of the chemical companies who have actually created these
to
PFAS.
Provide the extinguisher agent that contains PFAS.
Exactly, who've created the chemicals in the first place, right? And so that's the argument that this town in Wisconsin is saying, that they're not suing a local industrial plant; they're suing the manufacturer as a whole for creating these chemical compounds in the first place. And this town in Wisconsin, they have I think 3 or 4 drinking wells which are all contaminated with PFAS, and they've estimated that their costs for upgrading their drinking water plant, etc., to solve this contamination is about $65 million, which is huge for this small town, right? It's quite small. And so their argument is that actually we shouldn't be paying for this. The chemical companies who created these PFAS compounds should be paying for this. Hence their lawsuit, where they're trying to get basically compensation.
And just recently, after we recorded this episode, we learned that Talula has started her very own podcast. It is called the Water Leaders Pod. So congratulations, Talula. And for sure, we will be including a link in the show notes so you can check it out as well. The next of our winter guests in episode 24 was Michael Hanf, lead sustainable business at VTT in Finland and host of another podcast, the Circular Coffee Break podcast. In this one, he looks at circularity through very different lenses, from construction to textiles and cosmetics and many other industries. He believes that there is a lot to learn across industries on how to become more circular. We took the opportunity to ask Michael about his definition of circular economy and its principles, the challenges it brings, and how consumers can engage in it, its role in urban planning, and the power of society. Michael explained the idea of circularity, how we can use our resources in the most efficient and effective ways, and how can we give these resources a long lifetime. He also talked about the possibilities of circularity for products in 50 or 100 years' time. So that was a really interesting conversation with him. The final point Michael made was how we can all make circularity happen as businesses and members of our society, just as we normal citizens of our countries, but warning about perhaps we don't have long before it is too late. So I highly recommend that you go and check Michael's episode for this deep dive into circular economy.
So in its core, circular economy is all about resource efficiency. So how can we use the resources that we use in the most efficient and effective way and provide these resources a very long lifetime? As you said, the topic is very complex and very multifaceted, but for many, it's equal to recycling and waste management, which is basically narrowing it down to only the end of life of a product or of a material. If you look at circularity end to end, it's much, much broader than that. It starts with how do I design products? How do I design buildings? How do I design things so that they can last longer, that they can be reused, that they can be refurbished, and that the resources are used in the most efficient way. And resources here includes material resources, but also resources like water and energy, which specifically in an urban context is very, very important.
A few of our guests had already mentioned the European Union new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD for its seals. So for episode 25, it was good to speak to a true expert in this area, Ella Tanskanen, who is Head of Sustainability Services at Green Step, came to talk to us. Green Step provides sustainability services and financial services in the Nordic countries. So Ella explained us the CSRD, its goal of improving transparency and comparability, and how it now encompasses more companies than before. She explained the data management challenges companies may face, and also some of the criteria, such as the definition of a stakeholder, quote unquote, the technology, and the tools necessary, and many more things. Ella also talked about the importance of getting your stakeholders engaged, not just trying to tackle the CSRD alignment with your team. She also emphasized that despite the effort, the new directive will help future-proof your company against climate change. So go to episode 25 to learn all the details about the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive from the European Union.
Which would you say are the main challenges that for any company that in implementing this? Now, I understand you have been working already for quite some time and as a consultant advising this type of companies. Which are the challenges that you have seen, the key ones that they don't know where to start from or implementing the CSRD?
So I would say that value chain analysis is the point that has the primary challenges because the regulation enforces companies to analyze not just their own operations, but instead map and analyze the impacts for the whole value chain. And now companies at the moment, they have trouble finding their own ESG data from their own operations, let alone upstream and downstream impacts, risks, and opportunities. So I would definitely say that value chain analysis is the one where we can find the primary challenges.
Here at the Urbanista, we have had guests from almost all the players in our industry, but we were missing one, the construction company or the contractor side, if you want. But we fixed it. We talked with Martin Lundholm, project engineer focused on sustainability and innovation at Skanska. For the last 4 years, Martin has worked with the Skellefteå municipality in northern Sweden, which has the clear and ambitious goal of becoming the most sustainable city in Europe. Martin talked about the fascinating projects he has been working on in the city of Skellefteå and which have won prizes for sustainability. He explained the unique nature of early contractor involvement, or ECI. Contractors used to ensure a collaborative approach and the benefit of such collaboration. We even deep dive into the metrics that you should take into account to evaluate how good are we going? Are we really achieving these sustainability goals or not, even within the construction phase? Martin stressed how essential it is for companies like Skanska and municipalities to work together, sharing their expertise.
How can we reach all our climate goals, both in Sweden, but in entire Europe and in the world? We need to work together, and we as a construction company don't have all the solutions, and the municipalities don't have all the solutions. So we need to work together, and I think that's this procurement and evaluation, this kind of turnkey contract is one of the key factors, one of the foundations that actually bring all these companies together so they actually can do the best thing for the project in a sustainable way.
Last but not least, on episode 27, we talked with Eva Bannerbaum, strategist at Vea Syd, the water utility covering the area of Malmö municipality in Sweden. We learned from Eva how are they planning their future stormwater solutions. During this insightful episode, we discussed several topics: challenges with hidden infrastructure that needs to be renewed, processes or the thinking behind when planning a new solution for stormwater, And how are we doing in terms of meeting the 2027 Water Directive goals? We may be getting close, but not yet. EBA shared with us several data points from the research they have been doing. And one of the main findings was that 90% of the pollution for stormwater comes from already built infrastructure. That means only 10% comes from newly developed urban areas. So it is quite clear where the focus and the future investment should go. But wait, there's more. EBA's preference for rather large stormwater treatment solutions comes from the data as well, because small solutions are roughly 6 times more expensive and their treatment capacity is 50% less than the big ones. So it's pretty clear, absolutely. Look for episode 27 to learn from EBA more details about strategic planning of stormwater solutions, whether it's about retention or treatment and on-site infiltration.
And you could say that we have 4 major challenges. And the first one is that much of this infrastructure is built during the 50s and 60s, so it's getting old. And also during the same period of time since it was built, if we look at 2 of our cities, Malmö and Lund, during the same period of time, the population in those cities has doubled. So yeah, now it's time for us to upgrade our system, and we need to do it at the same time as it functions as it's supposed to. We need to keep on delivering drinking water and take care of wastewater, even if we renew our system.
So that's a wrap. This is how we conclude the season 2 of the Urbanista. But with this episode, we not only close one more season, but also is the last episode made by our dear producer, Mariia, who is now leaving Uponor to pursue her next adventure in life, moving far away from Finland. So thank you, Mariia, for your restless efforts to launch and to keep up this podcast growing. And for you, our dear Urbanista, our dear audience, thank you for coming along with us in this journey of exploring the horizons of urban development and water management in cities. I'm your host, Delfin Basallo, wishing you a wonderful summer of 2024, and see you next time!
Thank you for listening to the Urbanista podcast, a production of Uponor Infra, the leader in sustainable infrastructure solutions. If you found it interesting, why don't you share it with your colleagues? We all together can move our industry forward.